Hello, welcome. It's Pauline back again from PQW, and I'm thrilled to be here with you because I'm going to talk to you today about busting your stash. Got a lot of fabrics here. I have got drawers and drawers and drawers full of fabric, and I've decided I have to start using them up because I will never, ever get through them all making quilts. So, and I have lots of leftovers out of different projects that I make. So I'm going to show you what you can do with 3-inch wide strips and 5-inch wide strips. But we're going to explain a few things to you because what I'd love to do for you is show you how to make one of my creative vests. So we come over to the back wall here and I'm going to show you a vest that I've made from my stash. I've had these fabrics in my cupboard for, well, yeah, I can't even remember. They've been there for years and years and years. This light coloured fabric is more like a furnishing fabric, more so than a patchwork fabric. But we can do some amazing things with strips of fabric and make ourselves a gorgeous garment. Now, you're probably going to say to me, what am I going to use as a pattern? And when I started thinking about this and how I could bust my stash and make lots of different vests and maybe a jacket, a coat, I thought about if I make something and it turns out really nice and people want a pattern for it, it's very, very hard to design a pattern for every one of our beautiful body shapes. Because we know we've all got gorgeous shapes out there in our bodies, and it's hard to write one pattern to fit every size. So I've decided that the best way to do it would be starting with a t-shirt. And I'm going to take you through, it's going to be a 3-lesson series that will take you through from start to finish how to make a vest. Now, if you wanted to make a jacket, we would start with a sweatshirt or a sloppy joe. I don't know what you might call these in wherever you live, but in Australia we call them a sloppy joe. But I'll explain a little bit more as we go. So we can use up our scraps of fabric and we can use up our scraps of wadding. Doesn't matter what sort of wadding you use, we've all got lots of wadding left that we cut off the side of the quilt when we finish quilting it. So we can use up any of those offcuts of our wadding. But let's talk about your fabric selection first. And it's not like a lot of other things that we'd make where we want to blend our colours beautifully or we want to be concerned with what goes with what. But it does work best if you get some shadings happening in it, you know, some lights, some mediums and some darks. So I've just got a selection of fabrics here because this is what I started with the project I'm going to show you through this series of lessons. I've decided I wanted to make a little vest for a friend's little daughter. So I just thought, I know she loves pinks and pretty colours, so that's what I've chosen. So I went to my stash and I've just pulled out any of the colours that I thought would work together. But to get them blending properly, I always use, and I'm going to introduce you to my colour balance tool because this is what's going to help us choose the colours. So let's just explain this. We'll hold it up so you can see it. You know, some of these fabrics, you can automatically see this one's probably not going to nestle in with the pinks, but when I looked at it, it has got a lot of shades of pinks and burgundies in it. But when I put the colour balance tool over it, you can see it becomes quite different to the other ones. You can see this one's a nice light colour. We've got some mediums. We come back to lighter colours, darks. So you can see how it can help you balance out your colours just by running this over the surface of the fabric. This works well for any project, any of your quilts you're making, when you're choosing your fabrics. I really recommend you have something like this, which we call a colour balance tool. So I've selected the fabrics that I'm going to use and I love this little print, so I'm going to use that one. I'm going to disregard most of these because I just felt they don't work properly for me. So we'll disregard those. So this is the selection of fabrics that I have chosen. And because it's only a small little vest that we're going to make in this lesson, I've just chosen those 5 fabrics. I'm not going to use these ones. I'm going to use those in another project. So we'll put those aside also. So now what we're going to do, I'll talk about measurements of your strips of fabric and that in a moment. But what we want to do first up is talk about you choosing what size T-shirt or sloppy joe you would use to start your project. Now it's very important that you buy a size that's 2 or 3 sizes too big for you or the person you're making it for. So for example, when I've made this vest on the back wall, I started with a size 18 to bring it back to a size 14. Because what we're going to do when we choose the vest, to make the vest, and we choose the T-shirt, there's a few things to look out for. Number one, this little T-shirt here, which would be ideal for a small child, this one here causes me a little bit of a challenge because what we're going to be doing is cutting this apart. This will be our pattern, this will be our foundation, this could be your lining. Okay, so that's why we need it 2 or 3 sizes too big for you. But this one here, the shoulder seam is here, but the underarm seam is here. So it's off-centered, but that won't matter because what we're going to do when we cut this apart, we're going to cover all of these bits here. So it's not going to matter, but it is best if you choose a T-shirt where the seam, the shoulder seam is in line with the top of the sleeve seam. That way it's going to make it easier for you. After I made the vest that's behind me, I found these T-shirts, which I wished I had found before I started that one. Because what I like about this one is it has this nice rounded bottom on it, which is ideal for some body shapes. It's ideal to cover us. So I really would love to use this one again to make my next vest, which I'm going to be making lots of them. So get a quality T-shirt, and we're going to cut it up, and then we're going to use it as the foundation. We're going to cut all the strips of fabric and wadding, and then we're going to do a bit of weaving and get really creative with what we can do. And I'm going to show you lots of suggestions as we work through the series of the videos. But for anybody wanting to make a jacket, this is what I mean by a sloppy joe or a wind cheater, as you might call it. So if I'm going to be using this one to make a jacket, make sure it's got a set-in sleeve, not a raglan sleeve, because it'll be too hard for you to get the balance of all your strips coming back together. What we're going to do here is we cut off the ribbing around the neckline, around the bottom, and around the cuffs. Cut them off. You can keep them because you might be able to put them back on later on. We're going to turn it inside out and we cut off all the overlocking. So we're going to cut the sleeves out. We're going to cut the sleeves opened at this seam. We're going to cut the shoulder seams off. Then we'll have a back and a front and 2 sleeves. And then we're going to, if you want to make it into a vest or an open jacket, you would cut this in half, the front in half. So now you'll have 2 fronts, a back and 2 sleeves to work on. And you'll have a lovely warm vest or jacket because it's all fleecy, it's beautiful. So it's gorgeous for a foundation, it's beautiful, it's perfect for the lining. We have got a T-shirt here that I've been starting to cut apart just so I can explain to you what we're going to be doing. I've already cut the sleeves out. I've cut the side seams apart, as you can see here, but just to explain to you, we're just going to come to the overlocking, wherever the overlocking is, just get a good pair of sharp scissors, and I do love to use the jack scissors because they're nice and sharp. They haven't got too long a blade, so I can't get too far ahead of myself, and cut this apart. All right, we'll do the same with the other side. It just takes a few minutes to do this, and this is the reason why we need it 2 to 3 times larger than what you would normally wear, because cutting it apart and then putting all your trims onto it and then stitching it back together, it'll basically come back to your size. You might have to do a little bit of fitting at the end and taper it in here and there and shorten it and lengthen it wherever. Now, I suggest if it's got this little bit of binding around the neckline to leave that on there at this stage, because that'll stop anything from stretching. The armhole is okay so long as we don't go and iron it and stretch it too much. I leave the bottom hem on it because I'm going to leave that there till the end. So we now have our back. Okay, so I suggest you give that a good press, but try not to stretch it. Then with the front, I would suggest you fold the front in half. Just get it all lined out in half and get it all nice and even, and then press it with a hot iron. Just this centre fold. Just get it all level so that each side is even. And be aware some of the t-shirts and wind cheaters and that are not exactly centred. So just do the best you can, because when we get it all the creative work done on top of this, we can then trim it back to a nicer size. So just press up that centre seam and then cut that in half with your rotary cutter or your scissors. It's looking really quite neat, this one. You know, and you can even go to an op shop and buy your Sloppy Joe or your wind cheater or your t-shirt. You might have one in the cupboard. You might have lost a little bit of weight over time and you've got some old t-shirts in the cupboard. So we're just going to cut this through the centre. Then we're ready to start cutting our fabric strips and getting really creative. Now, I'm not going to work on this one because it'll take just too long to demonstrate it all. I'm going to work on a child's one, as I said before, a much smaller one. But no matter what size you're making, you're going to follow every step that I take in making the beautiful little one we're going to make now. So now I'm going to use the Weaver set, which is this set of tools in front of us here, the purple set. In the set you get the two tools. We get the 1.5 inch tool or the 2.5 inch tool. They work exactly the same as our normal sashes do, but you'll notice that the split that we've put in these is much wider because we need to accommodate fabric and wadding, so we're going to have a fair bit of bulk. But putting the wadding in our strips as we're going to is going to instantly make your garment lovely and warm, lovely and cuddly. So if we're going to be using the 1.5 inch tool, we're going to cut our fabric 3 inches wide. We would cut the wadding 2 7/8 inches wide. And with the 2.5, we'll cut the fabric strips 5 inches wide, and we'll cut the wadding strips 4 7/8. We want the wadding just to be a fraction narrower than the fabric strip, and you'll understand why when I start demonstrating to you. So I've got my fabric all cut into my 3 inch wide strips. If you don't have enough length in your fabrics to fit the length of what the garment that you're making, there's no problem with joining strips together. I would join them on the straight. I wouldn't join them on the bias. I'd join them on the straight. So if I had to join these two pieces together, you can just add them with your 1/4 inch seam or whatever seam allowance you want. You can join all different coloured strips together. It doesn't matter. This will look absolutely fabulous when you've finished it. There's no rules whatsoever. So now when we cut our wadding, as I said, I've got scraps of fabric here, or scraps of wadding, sorry. I've got a nice straight edge and I'll just put it out and I use my ruler, or you could mark it with a marking pen and use your scissors to cut that. That's up to you, whichever you feel more comfortable with. because I use the Hobbs Heirloom double-sided fusible wadding or in all my quilts, that's what I'm using for my vest. But if you've got scraps of other waddings, if you've got lots of scraps of different styles of wadding, different types of wadding, just mix them all together. It doesn't matter. Nobody will see what's inside the strips when we finish them. So now we're going to get all of these strips cut, ready. I'm just going to use my scissors because I haven't got my big rotary cutter here. And we'll just cut along. As I said, if it's not exactly straight, it doesn't matter, because when we get it all done, nobody will see what's inside. Just cut along. I love these sharp scissors, they really work so well. And this wadding's very wide, so I'm going to get a lot of length out of this. If you have to join your wadding in this when you're putting it together with the strips of fabric, that doesn't matter. Don't sew it together, just butt it up against each other. Right. So now we'll pull this apart. And we're ready to start making up our strips. So grab your fabric strips. Turn this around so we get a length, and you know, you might be doing this at your normal ironing board with your normal iron. That's perfectly fine. Put your wadding or batting down on the ironing surface. Put your fabric so one edge lines up exactly. Your fabric edge lines up to your wadding edge, and with a hot dry iron just press. So if you're using a batting that's different to mine and it's non-fusible, just press it together. It'll probably stick together, but if it doesn't, just come along with the Roxanne glue, baste it and put a little few dots of glue here and there just to hold it together. So you just keep going down to get the whole lot done. This is a nice long strip. Some of my fabric strips were just fat quarters, some of them are full widths of fabric, some I've had to join. Doesn't matter. It's about busting that stash. And a good idea now, if you enjoy doing things like this, as you're making a quilt and you've got leftovers, just cut some 3 or 5 inch strips of fabric and put them in a container. So if you want to go and make a vest, you could do it. So now what we're going to do, you notice that, see how it's not coming right to the edge? And I'm in a bit here compared to here. That does not matter. Don't be fussed about that. We're going to fold the edges in until they meet, like so. Now you could stand at your ironing board and fold all of this yourself and press, but it's going to take you a long time. So that's why I suggest using the weaver tool, because this is going to make it a lot quicker for you. We're just going to go up and back down. Okay, just thread it through just like that. Pop a pin in to anchor it to the ironing surface. Cup up the sides and push with the iron. And you can see that's going to happen a lot quicker for you than folding it yourself. And you're just going to go ahead and make all your strips like that. And once you've got them done, when I've made all of my samples for you to show, I just take my my sewing chair to the ironing board and lower my ironing board down, put a good movie on, and I just sat at the ironing board and ironed up a whole lot of strips like this. So there you can see that we've got the strip happening. Just want it to fold. Some waddings you might be better off using steam in your iron. Some you may not need to use steam. So you just go through and make up all of your strips like that. Then once you get them made, we're ready to start laying out our beautiful design and doing some really funky things with us. So we're going to move on to that next section. So here, this is the vest that we're going to be making, a nice little pastel one that I was able to find, and I've got all my strips made. So we're going to work on the back to start with. And it doesn't matter whether your back and your front are going to be woven differently, and I'll show you some examples. But what we're going to do, at these side edges, you don't want to put a full strip, because we don't know whether all the strips are going to fit across the width of the back completely. But you could do some measurements. You could measure the widest part, measure your strip, and then see how many will divide into that measurement equally. But what I usually do is, once I've ironed this out, I'll just pop this out of the road, I pop out one side, just undo it, and then we just press it out nice and flat, so that we've got one edge, the edge that's going to sit to the outside, to each of the outside edges. We're going to have them flattened out, like so. And then I try to hang it over a little bit, allowing for trimming off later on, so the width of the strip will be equal all the way across. So just play with your strips till you get the combination that you're happy with, and just lay them out. And I'm just going to keep working across with all the strips, and we're going to come back to the, you know, you might have 10 different colours here, you might have 15 different colours, it doesn't matter. It's just whatever's going to suit you and your colour choice. No colour choice that's right or wrong. Up to the spot. It's really easy, it's quite fun to do. So normally I'd be sitting down at the ironing board doing this, laid out on the ironing board. Back to this one. You just need to make sure your strips are long enough to cover from point to point. That one's a bit short. Let's see if we've got a longer one. I'm going to switch this one over because the neckline is shorter here. So we'll pop that one in there and that'll fit there. So just play with it a bit till you get it all the way you want it. Now we'll come back to an outside edge piece again. Too short. Right, so I've only got a little bit hanging over this side, so I'm just going to have to move things a little bit over, just till we get them all even. Now the next step we're going to take is a very important step, I feel, because we need to hold all of these in position exactly so they don't move as we start the weaving. So you could pop pins in, but I started using pins, and when I went to pick it up and turn it around, the pins all started falling out. So I found that the Roxanne glue basted, this water-based glue, was the best thing to use. So we're just going to now come back, flip your strip over and put some little dots of glue along just right on the edge, and then pop the strips back down. So do that on both ends. Once you've got the strips glued, I would then suggest you use your hot iron. So if you're doing this on a tabletop, bring the iron over to the table. That's why it's a good idea to do it on your ironing board if it fits on your ironing board. I've got an ironing mat on my table surface here, so I can iron straight onto here. So there we go. Oops, and you'll notice the t-shirt fabric will want to start rolling a bit, so you've just got to be a little bit forceful with it sometimes. Now we've got all of that done, so we're now going to set with the hot iron. Set the glue, then we do exactly the same up this end, And then in the next lesson, I'm going to show you how to start the weaving process. And I'm going to show you lots of ideas because we don't all have to do that all the same. There's so many ways you can do your weaving and it is so much fun. So come back and join me for the next lesson. Until then, start getting your t-shirt ready or your wind cheater. Start cutting it apart. Start cutting your strips out and getting the tools that you need. Don't forget your weaver set. Don't forget your colour balance tool. And we are going to use an awl, which is very important when we start the weaving. This tool is very important. You need a good set of sharp scissors. You'll need your glue. And later on, we're going to be showing you why I use the flower head pins. They're really important later on down the track. So that's just a few things to start collecting together, ready for our next lesson. Till then, bye for now.